customer craves simplicity. And that's like super, super true. And so before craving a salad, they crave simplicity. So like it's really key to keep the menu and the experience in store extremely simple and straightforward, as well as like the names of the items and the dishes that you sell. Because sometimes you get creative, but if you're like in our industry, like as a fast casual, you're in the convenience business. And so you have to make the experience very, very simple and convenient. And that makes everything else more craveable.
Welcome to Whisking It All with your host, Angelo Esposito, co-founder of Whisk.ai, a food and beverage intelligence platform. We're going to be interviewing hospitality professionals around the world to really understand how they do what they do. Welcome to another episode of Whisking It All. We're here today with the founder of Avo, Alessandro Biggi. Alessandro, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Angelo.
It's a pleasure. I always like meeting fellow entrepreneurs. One of the things about this show is we interview a lot of restaurant operators, but also tech restaurant companies. And we try to do the best of both worlds and give perspective on both the tech side, but also just on the actual restaurant operator side. So having said that, easiest place to start is obviously just a quick background on what is Avo.
Yeah, definitely. So Avo is a destination for seasonal, nourishing, and uniquely crafted salads and bowls. We're based in New York City. We have 5 stores over here. The model is, mostly takeout and really focused on the idea of providing a healthy but really filling and wholesome meal, to help keep people fueled throughout the day.
I love that. And so, one of the big things is always understanding the how people got to where they're at today and the why behind it. So I'd love to hear a bit about your story. I know you mentioned you were born and raised in Italy. So, we don't have to go super far back, but maybe like starting from there, right? Like from Italy, you come to the States. What made you come here? And then what did that journey look like?
Yeah. Well, I actually came, for the first time in 2014 with my first company, which was actually a tech company. So I was living in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and living the tech startup life. The company, I ended up selling that company, went back to Italy, and then yet again I went back to Seattle at that point to actually work on an existing business that was in tech and media. And sort of like working on, in a way, restructuring it. And while I was there, I realized how hard it was to find, a healthy meal that was also really satisfying. Like, which is something that in Italy is super common. In Italy, you eat like very healthy and with really high quality ingredients, but food is very, filling. And satisfying. So every meal is an opportunity to celebrate something, in a way. And I felt that there was not the case, like at least in Seattle at the time. At the same time, there was a place I would go very often, which was a really nice salad bar that I really enjoyed. But then I would end up indulging into like cookies or brownies, which defeated completely the purpose of eating a salad, And so based on that, I started making myself more, elaborated things that were still healthy by leveraging avocado as the main, ingredients, like salads or avocado toast. And realized that avocados, because they are super fruit and because they are healthy fat, they have that, duality of being super good for you, but also being filling and satisfying. Right. So that sort of triggers something. And I shared the idea of creating a concept around healthy fats. To my current business partner, Francesco, who's one of my best friends from college in Milan. And so together we decided to, explore the idea of building a restaurant together. So we started then coming to New York and found ultimately our first location, which is actually where I am right now in Brooklyn, Sunset Park. And then from there, so we kept developing the business and the concept.
Wow, that's awesome. It's funny you mention it because it's so relatable, the story you said of just like finding something that's filling and healthy, because I've gone through that too, especially finding things that are healthy, but exact same scenario, like you end up eating that salad or whatever, but then 5 minutes later I'm eating cookies, because
Exactly.
I'm hungry.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Awesome. What's the point of eating a salad if then then you end up eating something that is 10 times worse for you than than another filling meal. So
yeah, no, it's super interesting. And so I'd love to know, when was the first restaurant founded? So New York, I know you said you're at the current location you're at was the first one. What year was that?
Yeah, so we opened the first one in mid 2017.
Okay, wow.
And the restaurant started as a pop up initially because neither Francesco nor I had any experience in hospitality, so we wanted to try and test and see if there was actually any interest, any demand around the type of food that we wanted to make. And then thankfully we realized that there was a lot of demand for that, and so we had a great response. The restaurant opened really, really strong, and so in the second year we opened in the first year we opened the second location. In West Chelsea, close to Hudson Yards. And then we opened the third one later on because we obviously the pandemic, delayed a little bit all the expansion plans that we had. But yeah, now we are at 5 units. We recently opened the fifth one in January this year.
Wow, that's awesome. And then, I commend you for taking some big risks, because starting any company, and it sounds like you started one, like you said, in Silicon Valley, but starting any company is hard, but starting a restaurant concept is I feel like even harder, right? Because it's just, there's so many other layers to it, and jumping into that with no prior experience. So how was that like? What were some of the, because we have a lot of restaurant listeners, so I'd love to maybe share some of your early experiences from someone who wasn't in the industry. Then you start your first location. You were smart enough to do a pop-up first and gather data. But once you started your first location, what were some learnings that you recall that maybe you can share with our audience?
I feel like, restaurants are simple but not easy, meaning that there's nothing particularly hard except that it's a sum of a lot of little details that could go wrong or go well. And so I think having that ability to really analyze and divide, each little element and try to solve for each of that really helps in creating a concept that then ultimately works all together in a increasing manner. Yeah. I think for us, because we were a little naive, to say it in a good way, or ignorant to say it in another way, we did things that we didn't right now we wouldn't do, but that allowed us to start and achieve a good success at the beginning. I would say, very often with restaurants, you can take a little bit of risk because, every day is a new day in a way, and you can always keep developing on that, and people will still eat. So you can try to take a little bit of risk and see what works or what not. The key thing is, which I think applies to any type of venture, is really to listen to your guests, listen to your users or your customers, and understand when we initially opened, Avo was actually avocaderia, and back then we were more of an avocado bar. So we were serving, avocado toast, more like avocado-centric dishes that were a little more creative. And then, over time, we evolved by seeing what people actually wanted, and what they called for, what they wanted were the salads and the bowls, and that would leverage this healthy fats, to be more nutritious and filling for them. And so that's how we kept evolving the menu in a way, and ultimately developed full on into a bowl, type of destination, which is what, which is the model that we're now full on committed to, because we see that is what, people want, and it's what driving the habit, so for people to see us not as a one-off experience, but really as that recurrent experience that happens once a week, twice a week, or so on and so forth. That
makes sense. And how do you balance, because I think that's very well said, but my question is, how do you balance, let's say, sticking to your vision, but that fine line of just not being stubborn and listening to your guests? Because I agree with you 100%. You got to listen to what the people want, but at the same time, it's balancing your vision. So at that time, now you look back and you made that decision, and it's obviously for the better. You had 5 locations, but at that time when you're okay, I think this is what the people want, this is what I'm hearing, how do you take that leap while also being wait, this was our original vision? Because I think that's something a lot of restaurants struggle with. Sometimes they're a little too stubborn with their original vision that they don't move at all. So I'd love for you to maybe expand on that a little.
The key really relies on 2 key things. on the two main things. One is the ability to think long term, which is like, yes, you have a vision, but like, what's the end point? Like it's for us, it's always been wanting to be a place for an everyday experience. Like we wanted to have a positive impact on people's habits and diets. Like it was not about the experiential element. There was in the initial version of our concept, it was more like I want to make something for every day. And so that really sort of was one of the key drivers. And whenever you think long term, any small change that you have along the way become really, really tiny. Ultimately, it's like you know where you're going, what the North Star is, and so you're able to move a little bit. So sometimes you make the way a little longer, but you're still gonna go there.
That makes sense.
And then the second element is, we would say the core values, like knowing, what's the foundation, of what you're building, and ensure that any decision or any modification of what your project is still maintains the key values that you believe in, because those, remain, the best framework for you to decide whether it makes sense to make certain decision or not.
Right. And for people listening, what are some maybe like key dishes? I'm sure they could check out your menu, and actually, I'd love for you to plug your website. So for people who do want to check out your website, check out your menu, where can they find all this information?
Absolutely. So if you go on orderavo.com, you can browse the website and check out the menu and so on. We have 3 salads, 3 bowls, 3 specials. 4 smoothies, some sides, and then avocado toast and some breakfast buns. So the menu, it's small, but, there's a little bit of diversity in it. The all-time favorite is the spicy chicken bowl, which is rice, spinach, habanero hot sauce, pico de gallo, obviously chicken, and carrots and cabbage, and a little bit of tortilla chips on top, obviously with an avocado laid down, so to make things a little more filling. And that's one of the best.
What's one of your favorites?
My favorite one is called Portobello Road. It's also a bowl, and it has hummus, mushroom, rice, kale, chicken, chipotle mayo, and then cashew parmesan on top of the avocado. And it's really good because I love the umami, and the hummus's combination is really good.
That sounds awesome. And it's funny because, I'm used to going to, when I go to quick service locations, I'm used to avocado also. I love avocado, but it's always the extra cost, it's always extra. So it's funny that like for you guys, it's a central point. And I know you touched on like the difference in ingredients, generally speaking, and, in Italy and versus, the US. And I can attest that too. It's like, eating in Italy, you eat well, high quality ingredients, you feel full. Why do you think that is? Like, what do you think is that shift that like, why are things so different? Let's say, in Italy you eat really well, and I'd love to hear from your point of view. Why do you think there's such a gap there?
Yeah, I think it's scale, it's culture. Obviously, given the size, of the US, like obviously the way produce, is treated, or just produce, but like any vegetable or like even proteins, obviously, like it's a big issue. Like it's very different, just because there's so much consumption and so much demand that needs to be satisfied. It obviously has a big impact on how things need to be done to accomplish, and fulfill that demand. And I think in Italy, obviously being a smaller market, and with a lot of different also microclimates, within the region, allows for different type of smaller cultivations, that allow for the quality of ingredients. And then I think it's also cultural. Like in a way, here has been like, unfortunately, like there's not enough food culture. There's not enough. It's obviously developing, and it depends also on different regions and so on. Obviously, New York has a pretty sophisticated population, and as well as many other cities. But then there are areas in which, unfortunately, and that's where I think like something like what we are doing is extremely important, that grows and will reach those communities, because there are some food deserts, where honestly the only thing you can find is the super processed foods and fast foods and so on.
Local chain.
So unfortunately, exactly. And I think, obviously this is really hard to change if you think just about on the economics of things. Like a salad obviously cannot cost less than, 13, 15, $15. While obviously like, a very low quality, let's say ultra processed like burger or fried chicken and so on might go, as low as $5, something like that. So it's really hard, to change this in a way. I wish there were more incentives, for people to eat healthy, and because ultimately that contributes to make, better communities overall. I think if people feel better, they make better communities, and so it's so connected.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I'd love to hear like what's the vision for you for Avo, right? So like, I mean, so far, I think obviously from no experience in hospitality to opening your first store and then now having 5 locations, what do you see happening in the next, I don't know, maybe year, 2 years? Like what's next for Avo?
I mean, the good thing is that we are in the right side of the market. I think like there's been a lot of healthy concepts that have been sort of growing, and the demand is definitely going up across the board. For us in particular, I think while at the beginning we were extremely like, pumped and thinking, all right, we can open everywhere in the US. We're going to go to LA, and then we're going to go to Texas, and so on and so forth. Then realize how actually complex it is to operate restaurants, even on a very small scale.
Yeah.
And so I think right now the plan for us is really to remain focused on the New York market. Maybe, trying to keep expanding like in areas that are around here. So if it's not New York City, maybe Jersey City, maybe Connecticut, right. Or maybe even explore like venture out to Boston if really, we're brave enough. But I would say, the plan is to keep growing, and try to reach as soon as we can, like the 10 unit sort of mark, and then see how things continue to develop. Like one thing obviously that we're seeing already now that we opened this 5th location is that the more units we're able to get, the higher the brand awareness. And so the more positive results, as a company we're able to get. And also, I think it becomes also easier to attract like more talent and people and so on. So there's a lot of benefits in maintaining the focus on a specific area and being very local and grow out of that.
Makes sense. And, one of the things that Whisk does is we help restaurants and of all sizes, but we really help them with all the what we call the boring stuff, but the stuff that's necessary, right? Stuff that maybe you didn't think of day one, but then you open the restaurant, you're like, oh man, I got to keep track of inventory, and I got to figure out my orders from my suppliers, and I don't want to overorder because the food waste and spoilage, and my recipe costs, and with all the produce changing prices, you got to make sure you're making the same margin. So you got to adjust the prices and put it in the menu. So we help with a lot of that, but I'd love to hear a bit about like some of those challenges. Cause restaurants always talk about maybe the front side, so, marketing and getting more people in, but I'd love to hear a bit about the back house. Like from your point of view, what are some challenges that maybe you faced in the beginning and now hopefully you have more under control, but from a, inventory side or ordering or anything on the back house side?
Definitely. I mean, I would say that thankfully not having like the hospitality background in a way helped us, because we were very tech driven from the beginning. So we're able to really think about things like from a tech, is there a tech solution first, and then, how we're going to implement it like in a way. So we and also, we both come from also like a finance, background as well. So numbers is something that we've been able to really understand and get, get in depth from the beginning, because ultimately numbers drive every decision in the business. From recipe costing, to inventory management, portion controls, and also obviously all the food safety elements. This has been always like a priority for us. We've been using a lot of different checklists, for our team to be able to execute on, following specific like processes and standards. Obviously we use like all labeling apps for, to ensure that, for all food safety. We have sensors all across the restaurants. We use a software that integrates directly with the POS for, to scan the invoices and ensure that we're able to reconcile sort of whatever, we purchase with what else has been sold. So we try to, in a way to try to keep those processes like optimized and automated as much as possible. It's not always possible, unfortunately, but I would say, in general, most things sort of revolve around the POS, which is obviously the core of the restaurant and the core of the business.
That makes sense. And it's funny how you mentioned like your lack of restaurant experience almost helped, because it's one of the things I see all too often. Obviously, there's amazing restaurant operators out there, but one of the things we see often is they're focused on the physical side of just which is important, but hiring staff and just serving and all that side of things, but they kind of lack that maybe more financial side, or the number of customers or the number of clients we deal with where like they don't have a proper P&L, or they really got to fight to get that an accurate P&L at the end of every month. And it's something that I think, coming from the tech world or other industries, you kind of take for granted, and you realize it's not all too common in the restaurant space, and so like I'd love to hear maybe that side of things. How do you go about, let's say in the early days, thinking about your financials, your forecasting, your P&L, right? Because when you're starting from nothing, it's hard to kind of figure out these projections. I'd love to hear about how you thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was a lot of trial and error, like in terms of forecasting and budgeting, and also again, like learning what the business needed. Like, when we first started, we learned things by asking other people that were in the industry, and then obviously having our own experience in other companies and other industries. Initially, my co-founder Francesco is the one sort of didn't do bookkeeping because we had a bookkeeper, but he was always reviewing the numbers. Right. And it's still to this day sort of the liaison between the company and our accounting firm, that we work with.
Yeah.
So we have an internal reporting that we do every Thursday for the week before, in which we sit down with our GMs, and sort of review the numbers and so on. And that's something that we've had since the beginning. Like we've had that and the cash flow management from the beginning, because cash flow is another thing that you always have to keep top of mind. So yeah, I would say it's been a lot about really keeping that extra layer of control. And I agree with you, like sometimes it doesn't feel like important, but instead it's actually really crucial, because if you have control of the numbers, then all other decisions sort of will be influenced by the numbers that you're able to see. In terms of forecasting, like, we have to learn, how to make them. Like, obviously when you have no historical data, it's really hard to play around it, but you maybe talk to your neighbors and, how much they're making, how are things, what affects like potential sales, like, is there an event, is the weather, today, the day after Super Bowl, that we're recording this, basically we there's like a thing called the Super Bowl flu. So the day after the Super Bowl, over 16 million people don't go to work or something like that.
Shit,
so
wow.
Obviously, exactly. So like in days like today, for us, which we're very much driven by the business lunch, we see a drop in sales. So there's something to be expected. And these are things that even if you have the best forecasting tool, it's really hard to
right.
to predict. You just have to really think through and discuss.
Yeah, experience it. Now that makes sense. And then for people listening, like I think one of the things that's always interesting is any nuggets, not only on the mistakes made, but maybe things that have worked. Anything you can share. You shared like the pivoting part, which I love that. Don't be scared to pivot. Being financially driven, I think that's another good nugget. Like know your numbers, cash flow management. Anything on maybe more of the marketing side, or like opening new stores, or maybe getting more sales, or branding, anything on maybe the more the flip side of the costing side that you can maybe share, things that you think of and things that have helped you along the way that could potentially help some of our restaurant listeners?
Sure. I think, that there's many learnings. I think one sentence that I loved, actually heard that in a podcast. I think it was the former CEO of T-Mobile, of Sprint, maybe. I don't remember now. Anyway, but the sentence was, customer craves simplicity. And that's like super, super true. And so before craving a salad, they crave simplicity. So like, it's really key to keep the menu and the experience in store extremely simple and straightforward, as well as like the names of the items and the dishes that you sell. Because sometimes you get creative, but if you're like in our industry, like as a fast casual, you're in the convenience business. And so you have to make the experience very, very simple and convenient. And that makes everything else more craveable. So that's one thing. Another I think, key point is to really invest and keep building the internal culture. That's extremely important. We've invested a lot in team meetings, in team outings, in benefits. We offer PTO to our hourly employees. We have a very clear, career path. When they get to 1 year anniversary, we give them 1 day at the spa. They get, birthday cakes and things like that. And obviously, like, we invest a lot on the training side as well. We use a really cool app called Opus, and that helps us like deliver this micro learnings and get everybody more aligned, in terms of the expectations.
Is that
as well.
Opus training, right?
Yeah,
we had Rachel on the show. She was awesome, the CEO. Really, really cool.
Very nice
product.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's a great product. Yeah, for sure. And but training is like, it's extremely important to to set expectations clear, and through Opus we're able to also understand what at what level everybody sort of got, right, in a way. Then obviously you have to see also the performance in store. But if you know that someone doesn't not do something correctly, you have to check, did they do the training, and you can check it right away on Opus and so on. But yeah, so that and a lot of other elements on the training side, on the people side, are really crucial for the ultimate success of the business. Because I would say in the last couple of years, the biggest achievement we got was the promotion of to people that were started with us as team members and became general manager, and that created a really positive cycle within all the team members, and now see them as an example and say, okay, I can also become a leader in the company. So
that's really interesting, because one of the biggest issues, I mean, there's a lot of issues in restaurants. One of them is supplier cost of goods, I guess, keep rising, but another big one is labor. Not only labor costs, but just finding labor, and it's kind of a revolving door sometimes, so it's tough because you train someone up and then 3 months later they quit and now you're back to square one. And so that revolving door is a tough problem to solve, but it sounds like you have that somewhat under control. And I think a big part of that for people listening is creating that internal culture.
I don't want to jinx it now, because if you say something like this, then I mean, so far so good. Honestly, we're happy. We have a really strong core team. Now we have about 55 employees, and a lot of the great majority of them have been with us for a long time. Like, lately we've been celebrating anniversaries like more and more.
That's amazing.
And yes, like it's not easy. Like in the first few years, it was a revolving door, and then we really made the switch and started investing a lot more in culture, in those benefits, in the PTO, in providing a really good welcoming work environment, and ensuring that the training was up to standard, so that people would feel empowered. And so that's been really helpful, and I think it's now the focus for us is more on creating that bench of new leaders, so that as we open new stores, we're able to provide like that opportunity to keep going up and showing even more positive examples. Like,
I love that. I got one or two more for you. One question that just comes to mind is, what do you guys look for when opening a new location? I know you kind of touched on it a bit about trying to stay a bit more local, because you see those positive effects of brand recognition and things like that. But what kind of areas you look for, and like what are some criteria you look for when opening a new spot?
I would say real estate in New York is probably the biggest challenge that we've seen in the past 6 years. It's a terrible market. So, it's just very, very hard. So now I think we have a certain checklist in a way of like whenever we see a location, is like, is our target demographic over there? And, you need to have very clear who your target is, because at first we were like, okay, we'll see. We open and people will come. It's not true. You have to know exactly who are the people that you're trying to go for. And it's not always easy to understand if they're actually there and so on. But what we've seen, for example, is that we have a lot of success in really high dense like business areas, because lunch is, the main segment for us. And so we're opening where there's a lot of offices. Second one is like, are there your competitors? Like, is that like a destination already for other concepts, that offer similar experience? Because, ultimately you want to be as close as possible to both your competitors and to concepts that are like complementary to yours. Like, for example, if there's a cava, which, is complementary to us in a way, we'd love to be there because we know that we have the same type of customer audience, like guest audience, but we offer a different thing still in the same space, and so those are other elements that we really look into, and then obviously like the size, need to be the right fit for us, and well, rent comes with no explanation, but it's obviously like a big thing. One thing that we've done, moving up to the fifth location is that we've been gradually taking on a little more risk. Okay. So instead of like saying day one, we can take on a location that costs like 15, 20K a month, we started with let's say $1,500 a month in rent, and then went up to like, the second one was a little more expensive, the third one was more expensive, and so on and so forth, so that we could prove the model and see actually where we could get.
That makes sense. I love that. And then just to wrap up, and for anyone maybe dreaming of starting their own food venture, what's any advice or you want to just give them? I know you gave a bunch of interesting advice today, but anything you want to leave them with?
I mean, I think I would like to, maybe there's a big false myth that I thought was true as well at the beginning, was like, you want to start with a small space, with a small team, and keep things like as simple and streamlined as possible. You think that in a small environment that's better. It's not true. The reality is that if your concept allows you to have enough, guests and traffic to sustain, a bigger structure, the bigger structure is actually better, because you put the same amount of work in, opening a location that makes like $500,000 a year, as much. It's the same work as doing a location that makes $2 million a year. And actually you have a lot more headaches in the smaller space, because if you only have like 3-4 people working there, if you have a call out, let's say, then it means that 32% of your staff is out. So you have to, jump in and cover. If you have a location where you have 10 employees, and one call out is like 10% of your staff is out. So you still find a way to redeploy people and cover up. So what I'm trying to say is I try to make something that appeal to enough people so that you could build on a bigger scale rather than on a smaller scale.
That's good. That's a good piece of advice. And I know I said last but not least, but sorry, I always love to end with just all the socials and where people can find you. So just if you want to plug website, your Instagram, whatever channels you want, love for you to share it so people can find you.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. I mean, you can connect with me on LinkedIn personally or with the company as well. I don't have a personal website, but you can go on orderavo.com as well as Avocaderia. It's the handle on Instagram and TikTok. TikTok is Orderavo as well.
Okay, amazing. So you heard it there. Once again, we're here with Alessandro Biggi, the founder of Avo, 5 locations in New York area. So I love the concept. I love hearing about your journey. Thanks for being on the show today. Thanks for being on the Whisking It All podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Feel free to check out whisk.ai for more resources and schedule a demo with one of our product specialists to see if it's a fit for you.